All right. Good evening, everyone. We'll get this party started. Welcome to our budget work session number 2. It is Monday, November 21st, 7 p.m. We're at Trade and Transit 2/3 floor. We are going to continue on with our budget work sessions and ask some questions of our members of administration on a number of areas of our budget. We will start with the Department of Public Safety. I'm not sure who's. Chief, are you starting with the director also? Okay, very cool. We'll start with our Office of the Director. If you all want to, at the end of your individual budget sections, if you want to hit your capital projects also while you're already up there, just for ease of.
Yes.
Yeah, that sounds great. Welcome, Chief Snyder. Good evening.
Thank you. Good evening, Council.
It's on page 21 by John's marking system.
All right, I'm gonna start with Department of Public Safety, the Office of the Director, 2410. Going with under personal services, we have salaries, FICA, life insurance, workers' comp, pensions, health insurance, and then under purchase of services, we have office rentals, city hall operating allocation costs, and community outreach. I will notate that the salary and line, the first line item there, under personal services, I did change and lowered that to 40,140, which would change the overall bottom line to 458,550.
What was the number? 40 and what?
The salary is going to change down to $40,140.
All right, thank you, Chief. Any questions on the first page here for the Office of the Director? Mr. Pulizzi.
Yep, just 2 quick questions, Chief. One, why did we, it's not very often you hear of lowering salary.
No, it's actually a contractual thing.
Okay,
Our office manager is retiring January 6th. She's been here for several years, so her salary is commensurate with her time here.
okay,
So by the bargaining unit, the starting salary now will change.
understood. And just the second question I have real quick, community outreach. Are you able to speak as far as what that consists of?
Yeah, my understanding with community outreach is it's a funding in public safety that goes both to fire and police. We try to utilize about 1,500. I think we actually use 1,600 this year, but we use it for community outreach. So we put it towards the events we did with Cooking Up Conversation with police and whatnot.
Okay, that's what I figured. All right, thank you.
Yes.
Any other comments or questions? Ms. Mealy.
I don't think this is so much a question for you, Chief, as it would be for Tracy, but I was a little confused about the office rental and city hall operating allocation throughout this section. I noticed that there was no city hall operating or rent in the police department, but there was city hall operating, but no rent in the Bureau of Fire. Okay.
I had just included it where the rent was last year. We consider this part of the police department. So where the rent was budgeted last year, that's where I added those items.
Okay, got it. So fires, but.
It is
fires-
part of the police department.
No, but fire does have a city hall operating allocation.
Right. So this 2410 is considered part of the
Okay,
police
just the
department,
police.
not part of the fire department. So that's their allocation.
Got it, but fire does not say rent.
Right, because it's not.
Oh.
Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry, yes.
Right, because the fire isn't part of City Hall. So they're not
Okay.
paying rent to RVT because they own their own buildings.
Okay. But codes is? RBT, oh yeah, shoot, never mind, sorry. I was completely, and streets and parks is, even though we own that building,
We're working
we.
through that. We're not
So
sure.
we're going, so are we paying rent on it or are we not paying rent on it currently?
Currently, no, but it's looking like we will have to. That's why we have to budget it.
Okay,
Because that's the one that's sort of a variable out there right now,
okay,
is the Public Works building. It looks like there were federal dollars spent there. So we budgeted that as if we're going to have to pay rent, but
okay.
it's not, we don't have a definitive answer there yet,
And that's an accurate number if we do. have
if we
to
do,
pay
right?
it. Okay.
For RVT.
Okay, got it. Sorry, yeah, I was just getting a little confused there. So I was like, wait a minute. All right, got it. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? All right, we'll continue on to the Bureau of Police.
Okay, under the Bureau of Police, first we have personnel services. It's gonna have salaries, overtime, comp time, non-uniform, FICA, life insurance, workers' comp, pensions of non-uniform, and pensions and health insurance. Then we'll continue on to purchases of services. We have investigative expenses, training, police academy, travel, subscriptions and dues, medical, contract services, utilities. Then under supplies and materials, you're gonna have general office supplies, COVID-19 supplies, gas and oil, fingerprint and photo, uniforms with initial issue, firearms and ammunition, support equipment, communications. And then under equipment repairs, you're gonna have vehicle repairs, facility maintenance, radio repairs, radio maintenance contract, computer equipment. And then under equipment, you're gonna have vehicle lease purchase and vehicle purchases. And then under transfers, you'll have our capital projects.
Any comments or questions on the Bureau of Police budget? Ms. Mealy, and I think Mr. Bider as well.
Eric, you want to do it first? Or
What I'm just curious about is the vehicle purchases. You have listed $235,000.
Yes.
Were we going to be purchasing out the leases that we currently have on the new vehicles? Were we purchasing new vehicles with that?
Yes, what we did is budgeted for 3. So the idea is at least get 2 with it. We're still gonna have to pay 41,000 that remain on our lease to buy for the 4 Dodge Durangos we have now. So I know I mentioned vehicle lease purchases because we had it in the 2022 budget, but we don't have anything in there. Moved everything to the vehicle purchase line
Okay.
item. So
You said 3 vehicles.
yes, yep.
Ms. Mealy.
That was part of my question, but I guess actually the second part of my question was, is there a reason why we didn't decide to build that into the capital projects budget too?
We did, but yeah, please.
So when a department makes continuous purchases of the same type of items, it's considered operating. So
Okay.
the police chief sees this as replacing 3 vehicles every year. That way it becomes a standard part of operations as opposed to a every 5-year capital purchase. So that's why it was built in that way.
Makes sense. And last question, contract services?
Yes.
What are those?
That's goes with our annual maintenance fee that we have for our record management system right now.
Okay,
So that's 46,000 right there. We have some other things such as Power DMS, Power Time, Crime Watch. So that
so
covers the
these
cost of
are
those.
basically all of them are some sort of digital maintenance fee.
Yes.
Okay.
Would like to take note too, and under the personal services, under the non-uniform, that's going to drop down from 102,000 there to 83,385. For the same reasons that you asked about, Mr. Plizzi, in the previous.
Oh, you have another retirement coming?
Yes,
Okay.
When do you see that retirement coming?
same day, January 6th, both of them retire.
Got it. And my last question, Chief, actually related to, well, how insanely over budget we are in comp time this year. I mean, we're slightly over on both comp time and overtime.
Yes. What I like to do is I just like to combine both of them because essentially they're the same thing. It's just up to the officer how they want to take it.
Right.
So they allocated 180,000 for each, which would be for overtime and comp time, but it's up to the officer which they choose to take. So a lot of officers choose to take comp time then as opposed to overtime. So we're actually over on the budget on that when you combine the both of them. I like to look at them.
But when we combine them both, you're still over budget
Yes.
by 16,000. And I guess I'm trying to figure out, well, it's a 2-part question. How did we wind up so over budget on overtime / comp time? And if the administration is proposing to hire 3 new officers, we don't think we can recognize some savings in that area next year?
Well, I'm hoping it'll make savings. So with this year, with all the events, we can't predict everything. You know, right now we have some officers out. We have just another officer that's off on light duty now for a knee injury. We actually have one today that's on light duty now for a concussion. So we have a young police department, so we have young families. So we have a lot of time being taken off for paternity leave for the fathers.
Okay.
So,
I think it's probably overall good to have a young department, but, okay.
and then as you know too, we're have several events that we cover. So those events usually result in overtime costs.
Mhm. Okay, I guess I'm just asking if we wouldn't feel comfortable budgeting lower numbers for next year, if we think we're adding to the complement. How long will it take to get those new bodies on the street? 6 months?
Yeah,
Do we
we'll
have
look
a
at
hiring
that. It
list
could be
right now?
about 6 months by the time we get everything going, because we have the application process that we have to start. So by the time we get the application process started,
Oh, so
except
we
yet,
don't have a hiring list right now.
no, we don't have a hiring list. We just exhausted our list
Okay,
that we had just within the last month.
got it.
So now I want to put our recruiting teams in place, get out and do some recruiting. And then within the next month, hopefully start the application process, keep that open for a little bit, and then the testing process will commence.
Got it. So yeah, we're looking at realistically at least 6 months before we're going to make any hires to this program. And then we're hoping some of those guys are sorry. I said we're looking at least 6 months before we make any hires, and we're hoping some of those people are Act 120 certified. Correct?
Yes, it just, a lot of variables in place, depending if somebody has their Act 120 already, as opposed to we have to send them.
Yep.
So,
So basically beginning of 2023 before we actually have any people on the street on their own.
yeah, it will be a better half the year.
Thanks.
But just to notate, just wanted to point out a highlight with the overall, the bottom line, if I did my math right, it should be 10,352,600.
Got it.
Our increase from last year's is only 295,418 with just a 3% increase.
Mhm.
Mr. Biter.
Do you have a specific goal in mind for hiring these 3 officers other than just putting more bodies on the street? Are you looking at different policing tactics? Are you looking at patrolling different neighborhoods more
Yes.
aggressively?
Looking at all that stuff. Right now, you have such things as called saturation patrols. I like to do that kind of stuff now, but it's hard to when we're just responding to calls. It's hard to be proactive. It's hard to do community outreach programs and getting everybody involved when everybody's just exhausted. So you do have a police department that's doing a phenomenal job trying to keep up with the tempo. We just don't have enough personnel. As I notated last year in budget sessions and talked to several of you, right now, we are operating with 48 officers and a city this size and per capita, we should be at about 68 officers. And I'm not saying I want 68. I get it. I get how the budget works, but I just think we could do a better job trying to get closer to that to offset some of the costs. And not everything is costs. Some of it that I worry about is officer wellness. And that's a big concern of mine, providing a good service to the community and taking care of the community as well as taking care of our officers. So I'm just hoping 3 more officers, and they'll help offset that. To what degree, I don't know yet. So.
Is there a particular level of hire that you're trying to make or simply patrolman, sergeant, so on?
A little bit of it, quite honestly, it's going to be a test. I want to see how we're doing. There's so many variables and, I've been mulling over this budget and trying to look at everything from all the costs behind the scenes that are incurred. And it's hard because there are so many variables and there are so many unknowns. So trying to come down with numbers like that. So some of it is going to be a test to see how it works. And, I almost put out there, let's see how it works, and see where it gets us. It's hard to say how much and put a number on it because I don't know next year what's going to happen in terms of injuries, time off, families, and all that stuff. So it's hard to project for those types of things. But yes, there are more things I'd like to do with policing. One thing is I'd really like to do more with the community and getting out there and creating fostering a positive relationship with the community more so than what we're trying to do now. And like you said, we deal with multiple complaints of things going on in certain parts of the city that we have identified. I like to put more assets towards those. It's difficult, especially now. The big thing is you got the parks, and we're doing a lot of great things with the parks. And, so there's going to be a public safety aspect that comes along with that as well. So, does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Okay, sir.
Mr. Allison.
Chief, historically, we never put enough money into training. I'm going way back, 8 to 10 years. And it's increasing, which is a good thing. I just wondered, is that the 60,000, is that anticipating some new hires? They're going to need training, or is that for?
Yes,
current officers?
but more so, I'm anticipating that the increased cost of lodging and travel.
Yeah,
That's a big part of it. There are some new things that I'm trying to implement with more professional development. Some of the recommendations that were made by e-consults, especially with professional development within the administrative realm of policing. So there's some schools that we're looking to try to do, one being with budgeting,
mhm.
But that's the big thing with the training. And we're trying to, I'm big on training, so I'm trying to get more training for the officers, especially in today's day and age and with the tempo of society. A lot more is expected of us. And so we're just trying to
Right.
give the best product we can get. It's going to be training. So
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? One question, Chief, kind of circling back on the overtime comp time.
yes,
Do you have any sense of how much of that is driven by special events compared to just general responses? Even
not
if
right
it's just
off.
like a ballpark percentage?
I couldn't give you numbers right
Okay.
now without going through and manually breaking that down. That's another thing we're trying to work on. One of the things that we'll talk about
Mhm.
coming up is our record management system, and having a record management system that can help us break down the percentages where we're not manually doing it. I would say the manpower overtime is the big thing, more so than the events, because we have to cover our shifts. So we have to have a certain amount of officers on day watch and then a certain amount on night watch and morning watch that we have to keep per the contract for the CBA. So once they fall below that, then we have to fill those slots, and then that's going to be filled with overtime. So that's what we're getting hammered with the most.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's jump into the Bureau of Police's proposed capital expenditures also. That's the first page behind the last blue tab while you're up there, Chief Snyder, if you
Yes.
don't mind.
Yes, under this, what we're looking to do is budget for emergency rescue vehicle, record management system, as we just talked about a little bit. Firearms being long guns, mobile PCs, tasers, department PCs, body worn cameras, MVR cameras, and handheld radios. As everybody knows here, that we already purchased body worn cameras and we got radios and of the likes. We're trying to project out when we got to start maybe looking at new. So when we have to start replacing the body worn cameras and potentially the radio. So we're trying to put a plan in place. So, because if we don't have something like ARPA to bail us out in the future, we're trying to have a plan in place. So whoever is in this position at that time is not going to be surprised with that cost. So I can do a breakdown. I'm not sure how you want me to do the breakdown.
And that's up to you. I don't know if members have questions right now. If they're still looking at, it's up to you how you want to do the breakdown.
Well, we just have, I got the cost, and this is how we broke it down over a course of years. So with the emergency rescue vehicle, we're looking at about 310,000. Record management system, about 145,000. We have firearms being long guns, about 45,000. Mobile PCs, 60,000. Tasers, we're looking at about 200,000. Department PCs, 33,000. Body worn cameras, 201,600. MVR cameras, which those are cameras for in the vehicles, 150,000, and then handheld radios, 500,000. We are trying right now. We should know within the next couple weeks about grant, if we get awarded a grant. So we're trying to get a grant for some training. We're trying to get a grant for the records management system. And try to offset some of the costs for that. Mobile PCs, we applied for a grant for that as well. So keep our fingers crossed on that. It'll help offset some costs for us. So. And then if you look over, you'll see in green, that will notate the time and the year when we have to start making those purchases. So.
All right. Thank you, Chief. Does anyone have any comments or questions related to the police department's 2023 and then future capital budget expenditures? Mr. Biter.
The emergency rescue vehicle, Chief.
Yes, sir.
If you could explain what that is exactly, what the need is for it, where we would see I wouldn't say daily benefit for it, but let's just say monthly benefit for having something like that here in the city of Williamsport.
Yeah, it's an armored vehicle. It's looking to replace our 1985 way outdated armored vehicle that I'm not even sure would deter any projectiles from a firearm, to be honest with you. So what that is, that's a vehicle that can be used for a multitude of things. For tactical purposes, and it can be used for rescue purposes. It's known to be used because it has a Ford chassis with large tires and you can go off-road. So it's been known to be used for rescues and floods, go to places where in snowstorms to get those and help get them to a hospital if needed. So it's used for things like that. Primarily be a function under our SWAT team. Right now, we've been borrowing one. Luckily, we have one available to borrow, but for all the events and a lot of the dangerous things that our police officers are asked to do, we've had to borrow one and use that for all the events that we have going on now. So.
And the other question that I had as I look at the capital budget, which I'm actually very surprised by, is the cost of tasers.
Yes.
What is the lifespan of a taser for an officer?
Probably looking about 5 to 7 years. We're
Okay.
trying to get the best out. We're coming at the tail end of ours right now. So,
Thank you.
yes, sir.
Tracy, a quick question. So why are the cameras and radios in here? Those seem that a replacement plan would be operating expenses when we get to the end of the life cycle. So what's the difference between these and the cars?
Okay, so the cars are operational because you're buying three cars every year. These are the tasers you're going to buy every 5 years or every 6 or 10 years.
Gotcha. So I'm looking at this and I'm seeing, yeah, I'm looking at it wrong. So yeah, that makes sense. Thanks. Any other comments or questions related to the Bureau of Police capital budget? Ms. Mealy?
Actually, to that point, just a quick question. It's not as though it is presumably both cheaper and wiser for us to replace the tasers all at once, not
Yes.
getting so many every year. Okay, got it. I would assume that would be the case with the body worn cameras, because if we wanted to replace like the entire system, obviously it'd be cheaper to not have pieces floating around. But
That makes sense.
wasn't sure about the tasers. How many tasers, like how many of these items do we have?
Right now, I think we're 55.
55 tasers?
I believe so, yeah.
And the body worn cameras?
I think we got 55 as well.
Okay, got it. So that's just kind of the basic number to make sure that we have
Yeah,
one. for
give a little
everyone.
bit extra, have a little bit more
Got it.
that we have available.
So that makes sense. You don't want to lose one. Just kind of asking so that I have a sense of the per each.
Yeah, it's about 55, give or take 1 or 2.
Okay. All right. I think that's it.
Any other questions? Okay. Chief, thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
We will move on to our Bureau of Fire. Welcome, Chief Ungst, up to the podium.
Good evening, Councilman Yoder, members of council. Before you is the fire department's 2023 budget. Under personal services, some of the highlights here would be under salaries, we're looking to add an additional 2 firefighters to bring us from 35 to 37, including a fire inspector. We're looking to bring back the fire inspector position and also a full-time administrative aide. Under the pensions, you'll see that there was an increase there from 1.18 million to the 1.628. That there was an increase of about 500,000 for the MMO for the pensions. Personal services with all of those adds up to $6,704,262.
Any questions so far from members of council? Okay.
Okay, under purchases of services, the water and sewers for all stations, the light and power, as well as the heat, they all are budgeted to go up about 10 to 15%. I believe they're budgeted for 10%. Is that correct, Tracy?
It's like 30 to 40, depending on gas or electric, but
Yeah, I think our numbers are off there just a little bit. So, other than that, pretty much everything was status quo with the exception of travel. We're looking at doing some additional training. We have a pretty young department right now. About 70% of our department, I believe it has less than 6 years on the job. So we're looking at sending them out for some training, some good training. So that bumped that travel expense up from 15,000 to 23,000. The purchase of service, the grand total of that is 162,610.
any comments or questions from members of council?
Mhm.
Mr. Allison?
We're, excuse me, I forgot, in the salary detail, we would have 2 new hires and then this administrative secretary would go from part-time to full-time.
Correct.
Is that it? Okay.
Correct. And then that would also include the fire inspector,
Right.
which currently we are paying a fire inspector salary to one of the firefighters who, when he went back to the ranks, that was his previous position. So we still need to pay him the inspector's pay until we hire or promote an inspector.
Mhm. Is there a certification that goes with that position? Is there a certification that they have to?
There's certain qualifications that they have to meet in order to take the test to become a fire inspector. One of the things in addition to that is to get a Department of Labor and Industry license as a fire inspector. I believe that's number 18. Not that it really matters, but that's the number that they use for the Department of Labor and Industry for a fire inspector.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Pelisi?
Thank you. Hey, Chief. Quick question, if you could help me understand. So we don't see anyone retiring from the fire department this coming year?
We do. We anticipate one. Well, not we anticipate. We know one is retiring. Will retire September 1st.
Okay.
And we anticipate a possibility of another retiring early.
Okay. Because I think what currently we could say 35 and a half,
Right.
and you're looking to try and get that up to a proposed of 38. 38 positions within the fire,
37.
37.
Well, yeah, that's 37 bargaining unit and then the administrative aid.
So how many additional firefighters would we have then within the department?
That would be 2 additional.
Okay, so 2 additional firefighters. Even with the 2 additional firefighters, I'm not trying to pick. I'm just curious as to why we're still looking at budgeting $225,000 in overtime, even with the addition of 2 extra firefighters.
Right.
Can
I
you
think
help me
we
understand that?
Sure.
Thank you.
I believe traditionally we've been, as you can see, we've been going down with overtime. Back in 2019, it was budgeted for 370,000. This year, 2021, we're going to be right around 240, I believe. Somewhere right around there. So we kind of went middle of the road and went to 225. With that, those two additional firefighters, that would bring be able to bring the overtime down a little bit. We've noticed as firefighters come on, that kind of eliminates some of the overtime line item.
Yeah, again, the way my head works is that I assume that each position's putting in approximately 2,080 work hours a year. So when I'm looking at it, okay, we're looking at additional 4,160 hours additional onto
It's actually 2184.
21.
Yeah, we work 42-hour weeks.
Okay, 2184. Thanks, Chief.
You bet.
Okay.
I'd just like to point out that if you look at the actual expenses for the past 4 years, they have been higher than last year's budget. So I think last year's budget was maybe budgeted low based on prior history. So while it's more than the prior year budget, it's actually lower than all of the actuals for the past 4 years.
Okay.
Thank you, Tracy.
I have no more questions.
Oh, Ms. Mealy, sorry.
Oh, I just have one really random question too. And so if you work 42 hours a week, I'm assuming 2 of those hours are automatically paid overtime?
No,
No.
No,
Okay, so it's 42 hours a week budgeted at actual, that's 3 times.
correct. So it averages out to 42 hours a week. We actually work in an 8-day cycle. We work
Yeah,
about
yeah,
48
okay.
hours,
Okay.
roughly. But like I said, over the course of the year, it averages out to 42 hours a week. And then we have to work an additional 10 hours. So we have to work 52 hours in that 8-day cycle before we get the time and a half.
Okay, got it. Understood. And so none of that winds up getting budgeted as overtime, even if they are working an additional 10 hours?
It does. So there's
Okay,
straight,
so it does, so you're not making time and a half, but it is getting paid as overtime?
yes,
Okay,
yes.
got it. All right, so that makes the overtime argument in the fire department so much weirder. All right, sorry. Because, okay, all right, well, thanks, Chief. I'll keep thinking on that for
You
right
bet.
now.
Okay. Supplies and equipment, or I'm sorry, supplies and materials, pretty much staying the same along there, with the exception of gas and oil. That went up, I believe that was 17%. That we budgeted for. So that went from 26,208 up to 31,000. We went up $2,000 on uniforms. The total for the supplies and materials, 123,000 even.
Any comments or questions from members of council?
And equipment repairs comes out at $188,700 overall.
Any questions for the back end of the fire budget? Before we go to capital projects.
Support equipment.
Support equipment, yep.
What is support equipment? What is that
Um,
that you're looking for?
Yeah, so support equipment would be items such as SCBA cylinders, computers that we use in the trucks for pre-plans, new hose and appliances, thermal imaging cameras, pretty much any of the smaller tools that we use. Anytime you associate it with the fire department or the fire service, it's automatically doubled. You know, you could buy a wrench over at down at Lowe's and you have to get it from the fire store and it's twice as much.
And you have to get it from the fire store.
Yeah, you're supposed to. But yeah, I mean, but a lot of the stuff that's specific to the fire service, like a thermal imaging camera. I know there's a small thermal imaging camera that we use. It's called the Seek. If it's fire rated, it's, Chief Keith, can you help me with that? How much were those Seeks, the little? They're about $300 pop, whereas honestly, the general version of it for like a contractor would be 150.
Do you anticipate a higher expense if we're going to be putting a fire, if we're going to be hiring a fire inspector for new equipment, different equipment? If you could educate me a little bit on what a fire inspector actually does.
Sure,
Do you
sure.
anticipate higher?
So the fire inspector, they primarily go out and they make sure that they enforce the codes, the fire code. They do the inspections, the fire code inspections, which anything for rental properties, any unit that has 3 units or more, any apartment building that has 3 units or more, they go out, they're supposed to inspect those. They inspect commercial facilities. They do the fire prevention programs. So Penn College recently, we've done a couple fire extinguisher trainings for them. And they go out and they'll take care of those. They will schedule and perform the school fire prevention programs. They do the fire plan reviews or the fire code plan reviews for any of the properties or the construction. How am I bring plans? Yeah, the plans. And then they also do the fire inspector, fire investigations. They lead that. Now, right now, we do have myself and a platoon chief and a lieutenant who are certified to do fire investigations. So they're able to do that. But primarily, that's the history of what the fire inspector primarily does.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other comments or what, Mr. Allison?
Yeah, doubling back on, on the fire inspector. I think you had previously said that position could also become a fire marshal
Correct. Yes.
in time.
Yes.
What kind of duties does that add to that position?
A fire marshal for us would be a little bit different. They would be more in line with doing. They would be an administrative position. They wouldn't have any rank within the fire department. So it would be, like I said, an administrative position. But they could actually do, I believe it's Bethlehem. Their fire department runs their codes department. And I believe he's a captain. He is a BCO, a certified building code official. He runs the day-to-day operations of the civilians in the codes department, as well as the fire inspectors that they have there.
Sounds like a good idea.
Might be.
That could, are there any talks about us moving in that direction?
There has been discussion, yes.
Okay,
Yes.
all right, thank you.
That,
Any other comments or questions before we dive into the fire capital budget?
we still need to do the support equipment. Did we do that?
I thought we did that.
Did that.
We did that. I mean, you can list out how much you're proposing to send to capital projects, or
Okay,
we can just go there and you can tell us there too.
okay. All right, so under capital budget, we have listed a support vehicle, which is a 3500 Silverado that we're anticipating on purchasing next year, 2023, for a cost of about $90,000. That will replace 2 vehicles, a 1997 F-350 and a 2005 F-350 also. And they're in very sad shape, those 2 vehicles. So, but that one vehicle would replace those 2 vehicles. Facility improvements, headquarters. The roof on headquarters, we have a number of small leaks. I say small, the one leak, every single time we get, an eighth of an inch of rain, it's like a drain basically pouring into the engine room of the firehouse. We have a few others that have been looked at and they've tried to patch them. Streets and Parks have been in there and nothing seems to be working. We did get a quote from, I believe it's called Hilltop. Their quote was for $75,000 and that's a complete new install, including the insulation that's underneath it. And then the removal of the aggregate on top that we currently have. And then the installation of the new roof. That also in the capital budget is also the air conditioning units at the firehouse. This year we've had, I think 3 or 4 times we've had to have in this past summer, we've had to have Jordan from RVT come up and take a look at it. And then we had Sean come up and look at the air conditioning units and make repairs. They are the original units that were installed when the building was built back in 1979-80. So they are 40 plus years old. SCBA, we're looking at purchasing 10 of them every 6 years. Facility improvements, company 4 roof. We're still trying to work with UPMC as far as them leasing company 4 out on Almond Street. Currently, MICU 291 runs out of there. The fire department really doesn't do anything out of there. So in my view, it shouldn't be coming out of the fire department budget, shouldn't be coming out of the city budget. So a reserve quint. The reserve quint is what we're looking at purchasing to be an additional unit, reserve unit, once the new trucks come in. Once those new trucks come in, our ultimate goal is to sell all of the current fleet that we have. So Tower 1, Engine 1, Engine 2-1, and Engine 3-1. We're kind of in a catch-22 situation right now. The prices of the used market are starting to climb, they're noticing, but you're also getting more for your trucks that you're trading in. So, whether we do it now or we do it later, it doesn't really matter. But one of the benefits of getting a quint is a multi-purpose vehicle. It has a ladder on it, so we're able to use it as an aerial as well as use it as an engine. And that would also improve our ISO rating to some degree. So we're also looking in about 2024 to replace the Car 1 with a 1500 Silverado. Car 1 would then return to, or not return to, but become the duty officer vehicle. We have the pumpers that are coming in. Is that right? Yeah. The pumper that's coming in next year, that'll be in, the 2 new pumpers will be delivered the end of the 4th quarter of next year. And the aerial will be here the end or the beginning, mid of the 1st quarter of 2024.
What SCBA, what is that?
Self-contained breathing apparatus. That's the stuff we wear on our backs.
Gotcha.
Any questions for the chief on any of the capital budget items that you just went through? Okay. Thank you very much, Chief Ungst.
Thank you.
We will continue on with our Environmental Control and Codes Department, which is right after the fire budget on page 24. Good evening, Gary. How are you?
Good. How are you, President Yoder, members of council? What I'm presenting to you is a Bureau of Codes budget for 2023. The total budget is $838,250,000. Under personnel services, our salaries are $351,000. We currently have 4 code officers, an office manager, myself, and a street inspector. Under purchases of services, we have office rental of $6,500. We also have contract service of $108,000. Some other smaller ones, the health officer, subscription and duties. Our training budget is $6,500. And clean and seal is $50,000, as well as our emergency demo of $15,000. Any questions at that point?
I was never seeing anything in emergency demo prior to this year. Is there a particular reason for that?
There is. What we've been running into is more and more people out there do not have insurance. So if there's a fire, property extensively burns down, they don't have the money to basically tear it down. It becomes an issue. We've had 2 of them that came before us that we really just needed to have down. And we moved a bunch of stuff, figured a bunch of stuff, and got them both tore down. So I put that in the budget because, like I said, more and more people you're running into out there just don't have the insurances with fires and things that are happening. The buildings are becoming old, run down, they're vacant, and we do have those. So that's why I put emergency demo in there.
Average cost to tear down one of those buildings?
$15,000.
Okay, so we're looking at that one.
Ms. Mealy?
I think goes as a lien on the property, I'm assuming, Gary. If the
Correct.
vacant lot would be sold.
Correct.
Is that the same with the clean and seal? Does that turn
We
into a lien on
we
the property
up
as
the
well?
clean and seal because of that, because again, we have an enormous amount of some of the blighted properties that are out there. They're vacant. We need to get them boarded up so that basically they're not inhabited by individuals, basically just hanging out in them and things of that nature. So we've run into so much of that this year. When the clean and seal, when we do that, it does go towards liens.
Got it. And just, have you ever looked at what other municipalities, like how, is there anything different from the way we're handling it, things like this and how other municipalities do? Because it must be a gargantuan effort in like a city like Philadelphia.
It's falling in line with other third-class cities. That's basically why I put the emergency demo in there. Like I said, I've reached out to a lot of them when I was working with some of the stuff.
Got it. Can I ask one other question? I think this is just a small error in the budget, but just as a note, we only have 6.5 employees but budgeted in codes this year, correct? According to the salary detail, there are 7, but we've wiped out the salary information for the building official. And I'm not seeing any indication that we're intending to replace the building official in the budget. So I'm assuming there are only 6.5.
That is correct.
Okay. One quick question. There's a codes enforcement officer 3, and that person is going from, seems to be receiving a substantial raise this year, according to the salary. detail.
What happens with that as when a code officer is first hired, they are hired as a property maintenance. In additional, when they move up the ladder and go from property maintenance to a residential inspector, a property maintenance just goes out and says, okay, you got to clean up your garbage. You have some gutters, downspouts. That's what they do. When you get into code officer level 2, that person is residential. So when I get a permit that comes in saying I want to do a deck, they come in and do a deck. That inspector goes out and inspects to make sure the deck meets the codes and falls under the Department of Labor and Industry guidelines. So when you go up to, again, when you go up to the next level, then that's when you get into the commercial side of it. And that's a little bit more intense.
Yeah, no, I guess all that I'm asking is for some reason, what we're showing budgeted in 2022 for the same position was 41,000. But in 2023, the proposed budget is 54.
We did have one officer that basically went down from a certain code. But again, when you go from residential, which is 1, up to the commercial, it's a significant amount.
Yeah, that's fine. I just.
So the scope change is driving
Right.
that.
Correct.
Okay.
And that's all driven by the different type of certifications under the guidelines of Department of Labor and Industry.
Got it. I guess I was just wondering if maybe that was a numerical error. But, yeah,
Just to circle back on the previous about blight, with the RDA and things that we're looking to do there, that will most likely help with that as well. If we get some of these properties that are vacant, or just have been let go for a number of years, if the RDA acquires them, which we're working on an agreement, hopefully be here by the 8th. And then, so hopefully that will decrease some of the clean and seal that we have to do on our own if we get back into the hands of property owner that can obviously maintain it. So we're hoping that the combination of the two there, working with demo and some of the ones, getting some of the RDA's hands, and then that'll decrease the cost overall.
that'd be great.
And I
I'm
believe-
I'm glad to see the budget get increased, frankly, because we have a lot of properties that need that kind of care. But, right, the hope would be that we would be shuffling them into the hands of someone who would take care of that as the first step to really, to bringing the property back up to a livable condition, so. Right.
Yeah. And then as far as the codes, I think that's per CBA too, right, Gary? Some of those increases, when they get additional certifications, that would be,
And again, that falls under Department of Labor and Industry. Once they hit a longevity over so many years, they take the certification, they move up into those different categories.
Got it. Okay. Understood. And then, I'm sorry if somebody else asked this and somehow I missed it. Contract services, I'm assuming is the contract with.
Is for currently under Barry Isaac.
Okay, got it. And we think that 100 and looks like it's about 107,000 that we're estimating it to cost.
Correct. With all the development, believe it or not, that we've had going on. And again, when you get into some of the disciplines under the Department of Labor and Industry guidelines, such as plan review, then you have electrical inspections, sub review, those type of things like that. On the average, with all the development under the old city, Wisteria Lane and all those different type of developments that we've had in there, we took an average of about anywhere from $8,000 to $9,000 is what basically we've been utilizing at this point in time per month.
Mhm. Got it. So it is still a fee for service.
Correct.
based contract. It's not like an annual contract or something. Got it. Okay.
Can we circle back on the salary detail? So is it an error, or is there no plan to hire a building official next year?
we were discussing that, and right now, the way it's working with Barry Iset, I think we think that's going well. So it's 6 of one, half dozen the other. We haven't gotten anybody that was qualified that has applied. And so at this point, we didn't put it in. I mean, we can continue to explore that, but I mean, nobody that has applied has even come close to the qualifications for a BCO. And it's working well with Barry Iset. We're getting out well within the 10 days. I think some of those required 10 days. And so I think that's going very well. So at this point, I think we continue to utilize Barry Iset. We can continue, have Molly post it, but we just haven't gotten anywhere that even qualified really for a codes, let alone BCO.
If I remember, I thought the issue wasn't qualification, it was the residency, correct?
It's a combination.
Yeah.
It really comes down to a combination of everything. And it's really driven by the Department of Labor and Industry because you have, like I said, you just have certain skill levels. As a BCO, they issue permits, but then again, under the Department of Labor and Industry, you have to have someone that reviews that plan to make sure that it meets the building code. So that's a different skill level. So that's where Barry Iset and something, they currently have that right now. And some of the stuff that you have out there, you may have a BCO, he can issue permits, but then we're still going to have to send contract services out for certain things because it's plan reviews, it's ADA, it's electrical inspections. There are all these different commercial inspections, plumbing and electrical inspections that we require for both residential and commercial. So you hit all of those different avenues. And if you get a BCO, they can come in as a BCO, but very limited, and you're still going to need those contract services. So it has a lot to do with some of it's residential, but a lot of it is really driven by the Department of Labor and Industry, getting someone in here that has every one of those skill sets in order to be the BCO and take over the Bureau codes to issue all those so that we can relinquish Barry Iset from that. And again, if we find someone who has all those skill sets, then that what we'll probably do is that's where that salary will offset. So basically we'll lose their services and we can move that over into the BCO line item.
I mean, what I'm assuming you're actually asking out of this, that we have a larger conversation at the beginning of the year, maybe about what we're looking at doing in the codes department and how we're looking at moving forward and how we're designating responsibility. Gary, I know you're taking on a lot of responsibility there, but anyway, sort of what that looks like. Because yeah, I think that there's sort of been, you know, when we started the contract with Barry Eyes, I remember part of the discussion in the finance committee was, is this something that we might look at continuing moving forward and right. I mean, especially just given to a certain extent that the staffing issues have been clearing up on a national level, but nonetheless, you know, this has given us an opportunity to experiment with bringing the firm in instead, and it seems like it's going all right. So perhaps that's something that we should consider looking at, but then, right, we should all have a conversation about that. Maybe not during budget time, but
No better time.
somewhat.
Thank you. We can continue on if nobody else has any questions.
Under supplies and material, what we have is for boards, 11,000 for your different boards and groups and things of that nature, which is your zoning hearing board, it's your board of health, it's your plumbing examinations and things of that nature that are tied in with that. And that falls under your grants, gifts, and subsidies. Under equipment and vehicle, we have over $18,000. And the reason why we have that much in there, obviously, with the high cost of gas and oil, but in addition, the Bureau of Codes currently has 4 vehicles. At the very beginning of the year, we will be down to 2 vehicles. So really, we have 4 code officers, a street inspector, and I've been with the Bureau of Codes for 11 years, and I've taken my personal vehicle, no mileage or anything like that. So it's time that we put that into the budget. So at this point in time, we're going down to at the beginning of the year for 2 vehicles. So that's why you see that. And again, you'll see that. That's why we addressed it in capital budget as well. So again, first of the year, we're down to 2 vehicles. I've got four code officers that are basically out there sharing vehicles.
Any questions before we jump over to capital projects for the codes department? Okay. The capital budget, Gary.
It's under the capital budget. We have allocated for 4 vehicles. I know it has the Cobalts in here. We currently have been looking at, and in the budget, we worked to finance to deal with their Ford Escapes. And the reason why we went to the Ford Escapes is because some of the issue that we had with the Cobalts and the cruises that we have, they're merely cars. The Ford Escapes have a little bit higher clearance. The code officers spend a lot of time driving up and down the alleys and things of that nature. So that's why we switched the vehicles up, still within that budgetary when we looked at which is cheaper to maintain. And obviously, when they purchased the Chevy Cobalts, like I said, we're not getting the longevity out of them as we should. So that's why we switched it up and requested 2 to go through the ARPA funding and then 2 to go through finance, which we've already budgeted for as well.
Thank you, Gary. Any questions or comments from members of council on their capital budget? Okay. Thank you very much, Gary.
Thank you.
All right, we will move over to general government. We will do city council and our city clerk next. If you guys all turn to page 10, I believe, the clerk and council, and I can do the Bureau of Law, Norm, if you're okay with that. Well, I can do that for you. So I'll do the next 3. So under city council, for the first portion, salaries, FICA, life insurance, pensions, medical insurance, everything's pretty much status quo between our pay, life insurance. There's small changes, but nothing overly crazy. The office rental, city hall operating allocations are proportional to what we use. Office supplies and equipment are in line with last year. I mean, nothing really out of the ordinary as far as when I put that together. And then everything that matches last year, essentially between legislative contingency, training in case something pops up, and then other expenditures of 17,500. Total budget is 292, 212. It's up just a tad from last year. Does anybody have any questions related to the city council budget? Okay. We'll go to the city clerk. So under personal services, there's a slight pay bump. I believe that's in line with was it 3%? Okay. Everything else is generally in line with everything we've been seeing, I think, within the rest of the budget. Office rental, city hall operating allocation are in line with everything else. Advertising, there's an uptick in advertising, just between, I think, what we've been going through with, meetings popping up, that kind of stuff. I think with some changes with some of the boards and commissions, et cetera, we've seen an uptick in advertising. So I carried a little bit extra to cover that for next year in case that continues through. The only other big difference here is under supplies and materials software. So we approved the contract for, I forget what the name of it is, but it's the right to know software. And that is covered in there for next year's as well. The one thing I would note, I actually did put in here a larger salary increase for a city clerk. I think I had it up to, 43 for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think she's underpaid compared to what other city clerks do within other third-class cities. But number two, I think when she decides to retire, I don't think we're going to get somebody of equal caliber at the salary we're currently paying our city clerk. So I thought a slow incremental pay increase above the cost of living would make a little bit of sense to help us more adequately compensate our city clerk, but also get that to where I think we're going to want it to be whenever a future council has to backfill her position. So food for thought for council members, but that's the only thing that has changed from what I submitted versus what you see in front of you.
You have 43.
I submitted 43. The administration lowered it down to 41,200 in line with the 3% that they did.
43.
I had 43. Yeah, I can double check that.
43 even.
43 even. Yeah.
Okay.
So any questions on the city clerk's budget? Okay. And then I think the Bureau of Law is on page 17. And this one's pretty straightforward. Legal services, $128,300. So we certainly contract out our Bureau of Law. And so pretty self-explanatory. Any questions? We are coming in very much under budget compared to what we had budgeted last year.
Mhm.
So I mean, there's a number of factors that drive that certainly, between litigations, all that kind of stuff. But seeing as how we're under budget this year, I hope that's a good trend. So that's something that we can potentially keep in the back of our minds.
I think we've been judicious about
Yeah.
using it.
Yep. Very much so. Any questions on really any of the three: city council, city clerk, Bureau of Law? Okay. We'll move to the controller's office. I don't know. I gotta find it. Good evening, Peg. How are you?
Good evening, President Yoder, members of council. The proposed budget for the Controller's Office in 2023 is as follows. The Controller's salary includes a 2% increase per ordinance. The salary, personal services is salaries $60,498. FICA $4,630. Life insurance, $100. Workers' comp, $39. Pensions, $14,650. Health insurance, $13,895. Auditing services, $75,000. Office rental, 9,592. City Hall operating allocation, 25,704. For supplies and material, general office supplies, 700. General office equipment, 700. For a total of 205,500, and I believe it's 8. It's small, so I think it's 8,000. 506 or 8, I can't tell for sure.
508. You're correct.
Well,
You're correct.
I had eye surgery and it's sort of fuzzy a little bit.
Yeah, no worries. Any comments or questions for the controller's budget? Peg, I don't think you have any capital projects on here, do you? No, I don't think so. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll move to our tax collector and treasurer's office. Welcome, Mr. Mackey.
Good evening, President Yoder and members of council. I decided to keep most of the budget that Mr. Grimes had kept. There is a increase in our wages, in our salaries, because we will be hiring another person and sharing them with finance to cover that added cost. For the most portion of this, the only other increase on there is the city hall operating, which is about 35,000. Other than that, we try to keep things as close to what we had last year.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mackey. Any questions or comments for Mr. Mackey or city treasurer? Ms. Mealy?
Just because I was going to wind up asking it one place or the other, is the full salary for the full-time person in your budget salary? Is it? split?
Correct.
And
It's
so
in,
has it
it's in all of my budget, correct.
Okay, all right, got it. Okay. That was everything.
Any other comments or questions? Kevin, what's the extra equipment? It jumps up from 18,000 last year to 30,000 for 2023.
Well, the last, we had the $12,000 transfer from a month ago.
Yeah.
So that's why it actually dropped from 30,000 to that. And that was to anticipate the increase of a full-time person. I will be using not most, but the majority of that, because we'll be doing a MVP online filing next year.
Okay.
If I can get away with that. We'll see if we can swing that with our contract, but that's the only thing I anticipate more out of next year. Everything that I think we might come under budget again for the equipment.
Okay. Let me go back to the salary detail. The only other thing I was going to call out, I don't know if you're able, if you did, it might be wise to look at a little bit of a pay increase for Kristen.
Wrong department.
What's that?
She's not in our department.
Yeah, sorry.
Wendy is in our
Wendy, I'm
department.
mixing up names. Thank you. Well, no, and I just say that, I mean, she's a very valuable resource and she's lived through, I think, 2 of the transitions that she went through the transition from whoever was before Nick to Nick, and then the transition between Nick and you. And she's pretty much done that job twice.
Correct.
And so I think, and she's been here a while. So I think that if there's some kind of additional merit increase we can do, I think that would be a really wise idea.
That would have to be looked at with the union position before we could do that, but because she is
Okay.
union, so we'd have to go by with that, whatever we're allowed to with that. But you are correct in that this office cannot run without her.
Yeah. I mean, if you haven't, I would encourage you to look at it, and I think that would be a really good idea.
Yep.
Other comments or questions? All right, Ms. Mealy.
I actually had a whole series of questions, some are related to the controller's office, but that could easily go with this office as well, that I intended to ask. Just a little further clarification on the rent thing. What are, I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm not leaning up here and leaning in, as they say, tonight. What are we currently paying? What have we budgeted to pay RBT for rent? How does that compare to what we currently pay them versus?
So To be honest, we haven't paid RVT for any rent yet because the numbers continue to change on how much you entered into an agreement with them for $11 a square foot, but there is continuing discussion about square footage. So just today, I got a corrected invoice from RVT. I did not have a chance to look at it to see how it affects these numbers. But as far as the controller's office and treasurer's office, I think those are what they paid last year and are standard for this year, same for this year.
Okay, no, I guess I'm just asking. There were a couple of variables. I mean, there's the square footage debate, which is strange to me, but
Me
okay,
too.
but yeah, but okay. But anyway, so what you're saying to me is what is currently budgeted by the time you add up all of the rent across all of the offices is what we were paying RVT last year.
Correct. The only departments were city clerk and IT changed midway through the year.
Okay,
They were added. So everyone else is the same. Let me clarify that. Everyone else is the same except for city clerk, IT, public works, because all of a sudden we're going to need to start paying for the public works building. The engineer's budget changed from engineer to recreation because the engineer has moved out to public works. And RVT told me to budget $1,200 for city council for this room.
okay. So that was part of what I was asking. So we have covered the potential cost of usage of this room in the budget as well.
According to what RVT told me, yes.
Okay, but what you are also telling me is that there is no wiggle room in those numbers. So if it turns out there's increased square footage, or if we use this room more than $1,200 worth, there's no, right, like.
They told me that I was to budget $100 a month for this room for cleaning. That's what they told me.
Okay, all right, got it. Sorry, I'm just trying to see what our exposure is on that. if the
I will
numbers
tell you
increase.
that in the email I saw today, there were changes in square footage.
Okay, and they were generally speaking increases.
I know for at least one department, there was an increase.
Okay.
So, I mean, if we're using more square footage, I mean, I guess that makes sense, but I mean, we have a contract with RVT, so I would actually suggest, I mean, that needs
Right.
amended. They can't just tell us what to budget. We have to work off of that contract. I
Right.
mean, and
Correct.
clearly, if we are using more space, we need to amend or renegotiate that contract, but
The contract
there-
does not have specific square footage in. It says $11 per square foot. And then-
I remember that having specific square footage in part of it. We had that discussion.
I remember there being a definitive
There was
number.
There was
Yeah.
maps. There were maps attached, but there was no square footage. When I went to look
Okay.
and see what the
Mhm. Could've
swore
calculation
there
should
was.
be, it was not in there.
Okay.
So, and the other thing is that this area is not in there.
Mhm.
So there's pieces that fall outside of that agreement.
Okay.
And we're currently in works with them on the public works piece. We just,
Mhm. And we are also paying rent to them for the building occupied by the police department, correct?
that is
Like
correct.
all of our leases are
Yes.
executed with RVT.
That's correct.
Yes.
Except for the fire station.
Yeah, except for okay. And not to beat a dead horse, but we have looked at the cost comparison between City Hall. I'm just looking at these numbers and it's really hard to tell, but between the office rental and the City Hall allocation, the City Hall operating allocation, trying to subtract IT. I mean, we are relatively sure that we're saving money in this current iteration. Yes.
Current iteration as far as renting
Yeah,
the space.
right. Yeah, I don't know. That's
No,
why I'm asking.
I'm not, that's a whole other rabbit hole.
I know.
but
I mean, I'm not trying to open up a
But-
whole lot of
but
budget. I'm just.
I
putting it
would
out.
say no, because, I mean, we have options to lease other places that are probably at least half of the cost, if not maybe 3/4 of the cost.
Mhm.
And so, and we're not gonna get into this, extra square footage, extra, rate increases after a year or two as well, so.
Right.
To that
Yeah.
point, though,
Yeah, no, I'm just, right. I think it remains a little confusing to me because it seems as though it remains in flux, right? We haven't arrived at a settled anything on this, and that I think especially a year into it makes me a little nervous. But understanding that we're trying to arrive at some sort of long-term standing with our VTA, nonetheless, it's taking longer, I think, than any of us anticipated. So I think we're all, undoubtedly the administration is as well, getting sick of the moving parts there.
Just today, I got revised utility invoices for October, November of 2021. That was
Okay.
the first revised invoices I've gotten from them.
And they were
On
revised up,
utilities.
I presume?
What's that?
They were revised up, I presume?
No, they were revised down
Oh, well, that's good.
because the percentages they were using were not accurate.
Okay.
So I sent them back. I sent them 4 months back and said they needed to fix them. And so we just got 2 months back today.
Okay. All right. Mhm. Got it. But at least those numbers are lower than what we had paid them for the utilities.
They were.
Okay, good. All right. As long as it's, yeah, okay, which I, thank you. All right. Actually, if I can ask one question, legit on the controller's budget, the audit.
So you have not had an audit since 2018. The goal would be to get at least 1.5 audits done during the year 2023.
Okay. But those audits will pertain to 19 and 20. Obviously, we can't complete an audit for 2021 until we have.
Correct. So I thought if we can get through 2019 and well on our way to 20, during 23, we're starting to get you caught up.
Mhm. So that budget number is for those audits, because we also did not really know what those were going to cost.
I'm sorry, we also did not.
Did not really know what the auditing process for 19 and 20 was going to cost, but we think that number will cover. Okay,
1.5.
okay, all right, got it. So, all right, sounds good. All right, thanks. All right,
No worries.
missed that slip past me and I looked up and thought.
Any other comments or questions related to the treasurer tax collector's office? Okay,
Those, I just want to mention something one quick. The treasurer's office is also due for an audit. We are supposed to be audited anytime there is a change in treasurer. Sorry.
So is that budgeted anywhere? Or are you telling me that's not in the budget?
That was not in the budget. I wasn't unsure on who's supposed to be paying for that one.
Okay, my guess is PEG, right? I mean, the controller's office deals with all the audits.
I would think so.
Correct. That's the auditing branch of
That's their
the,
job.
the city.
That's their job.
So we'll be needing to build that in. Any chance it will cost less than whatever money Vince pointed out wasn't in the increase or our income last year?
I can talk with the auditing firm and see if they have an idea of how much they anticipate that will cost.
Okay, I'm assuming we can audit the treasurer's office for all prior years without having audits for the full of city government, correct?
Typically, what I've seen in this instance, when a treasurer is turned over, is there's an analysis of what they have final control over. And then there's testing done specifically over those areas. It's not like an audit of the whole department, but an audit of processes that the treasurer has control over.
Got it. So that should be completely independent of. any
Right,
other
correct.
existing city audits. Good. Excellent. All right. Thanks, Jason.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mackey.
Thank you.
We will move to our Human Resources Department.
Good evening. The summary of the 2023 proposed budget for the Human Resources Office is as follows. Under Personnel Services, we have salaries, FICA, life insurance, workers' comp, pensions, and health insurance for a total of $101,000 and $101,144. Under Purchase of Services, office supplies, medical exams, telephone, office rent, City Hall operating allocation and training for a total of $19,202 for a total proposed budget of $120,000, $346,000.
Thank you. Molly, any comments or questions related to the human resources budget? Crickets, straightforward.
All right, great, thank you.
Thank you. We will move to the engineering department. It was added today. Welcome, John Sander. Way out here.
Yes, good evening, everybody. So apparently I'm my own department now. Let me just go through the,
Yeah.
yeah, sure. Okay,
Page
so
20, I believe,
currently I make $80,000 in line with the 3% increase. It'd be 82,400. If I go, you mean to go through all of them, it's very short and sweet, I guess. It wouldn't hurt. Sure, FICA is 6,300. Life insurance is 100. Workers' comp is 2,977. Pensions is 14,650. Health insurance is 37,800. And in the services category, it would be training for $250 a year, advertising for $525, city hall operating allocation for $33.86, contracted services $7,500, and then general office supplies for $50.
All right, any questions for the engineering department? Ms. Mealy?
Just want to know what the contract services are.
Excuse me?
What are your contracted services?
Sure. So when we go after grants, I oftentimes need engineering plans, some upfront engineering plans, some upfront calculations, work cost estimates, et cetera, to go along with the grant,
Okay,
to send it out, to package it.
got it.
So
So this is,
generally what was used over a 1 year time span.
okay. And do we, who is the firm that we use for that? Do we RFP those
It
services?
varies. There's an open end with Larson Design Group, which we've used historically. I don't always want to use any one particular firm, but
But so that is at your discretion. It's not like something that we settle on an annual basis or anything.
as of right now, there is apparently an open end contract from back in
I know that.
time.
Yeah, we've had an open end.
Yeah.
That was what I was assuming it was, but then.
Correct.
okay. So we've been using Larson Design for those services.
Yeah, I'm trying to think that yes, we have.
Okay. And if we wanted to utilize another firm, we would need to go out and look for an open-ended contract.
I think there might be a small amount where I don't have to. I'm not sure. I have to defer to Norm on that. A small dollar figure amount. Okay.
Mhm. I guess part of what I was curious about was I know that we'd hired someone to inspect the work on the streets, the street contractors' work last year.
That's
This is
correct.
not money for that. and
No,
that's
that
not
comes
in the
straight out
budget.
of liquid fuels. That was Bass Engineering. I think it was around 48,000. They only actually invoiced about 15,000 this year.
Okay,
So yeah.
got it. Where is that in the budget and if so, where?
That dollar figure for
Yeah.
to hire them again,
Yeah,
no, it's not.
okay, got it. And so we're not anticipating hiring them again.
They approached me wanting to see if they could continue on for next year. I said, just I'll let you know. So, but it wouldn't be until,
John, can you clarify for her? It's in liquid fuels budget.
That's
Being
liquid
paid out
fuel.
of liquid fuels.
Yes,
Tara
correct.
had a-
Yes.
he had a liquid fuels,
yes.
but it is not currently budgeted within liquid fuels budget, correct?
It would be part of the liquid fuels budget.
Okay, and we have the flexible funding in there that we would be able to do that if we wanted to. Okay, got it. All right, that's all. Thanks, John.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other comments or questions for the Bureau of Engineering? Okay, thanks, John.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move into the Finance and Administration Department. We'll start off with the Bureau of Information Technology, which I believe is actually included in City Hall operating on the packet, correct?
Correct. So if you look on page what would be page 19, if you numbered your pages, you'll see the history there because it was in the general fund, right? And so on page 19, you'll see the history, and then on page 35, you see the current year.
Thank you, thank you. Mr. Black, good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir.
The floor
Members of
is
council.
yours.
So for my budget under personal services, we have salaries at 72,100, FICA at 5,520, life insurance at 100, workman's comp at 154, pensions at 14,650, and health insurance at 32,775.
Any comments or questions so far? Okay,
Under supplies and materials, I only have a supplies item of $5,000. Under department projects, I have equipment at $7,500, software at $12,000, and GIS software at $11,000.
any comments or questions? Okay,
Under purchase of services, under contracted services, I have that at $122,000 or $122,068. Web hosting and maintenance is $600. Telephone, which is cell phones and so forth of my department, they're at $815. Office rental of $4,620. And courthouse operation allocation of $8,902.
any question? You mean City Hall operating?
Yeah, I'm sorry, yeah.
No worries. Any
Old
comments
habits.
or questions, Ms. Mealy?
Actually, I should have asked this in the last section, but GIS software,
Yes,
what, is that an ongoing, like an annual?
yes, that is
cost?
an annual subscription-based package.
Got it. And we're not hoping to augment our GIS or anything.
I'm sorry, what?
We won't be augmenting our GIS or anything like that. with
Our
this.
GIS that we have is out of date. It was never renewed license-wise.
Okay,
It's worthless.
okay, so this is a new cost.
This is a new.
Sorry, it's
this is-
it's
yeah, I'm
very
sorry,
hard to
yeah.
tell with a completely blank budget.
Yeah,
before
I
this
know,
year.
I know.
I didn't remember us
It had
spending
been
money on
budgeted
GIS
year,
before, but
it
I
had been
wasn't
budgeted
sure.
pretty much every year up to this point,
Okay,
but it was, the licenses were never renewed.
okay.
And for us to renew the license to bring it up,
Mhm.
it's extraordinarily costly.
Okay,
It's better to go to their online service.
got it. Okay, so we're moving to an online GIS and that will
Yes,
benefit.
part of it
which-
will be in-house, but will be continued getting feed from outside.
Got it. And which departments? That's primarily a codes-based usage, or do we have other? Well, no,
Codes,
obviously,
fire,
costs.
streets and parks, recreation can use it,
Okay.
police department,
I know.
pretty
I
much
know-
everyone.
I know at one point we flirted with the idea of having a public-facing GIS element that would allow people to say like call out potholes or something like that.
Mhm.
Is that's not contemplated in the current software?
Can be.
Can be? Okay, all right, just asking.
Capabilities
It just
there.
depends on how much you're willing to pay someone to take care of doing it.
Right,
That's the
right.
thing. I mean, it could end up being a full-time position, just maintaining the GIS.
Got it. Mhm. And currently you're maintaining the GIS in terms of.
No.
in the city? No,
Nobody is.
and nobody is. Got
Correct.
it. Okay, all right,
We get a file periodically from the county.
okay. All right. Okay, thanks.
Any other comments or questions on the IT budget before we flop over to the capital projects? Mr. Biter?
Just a little bit of clarification, because we talked about it last week, how IT was getting allocated throughout different departments within the administration. So what is it exactly that we're allocating to those departments? And is it salary? Is it like GIS? Is that going towards police, fire, and so on?
It's the whole department.
It's the entire
So
department.
it's the entire department, so that 338, right? And then it's allocated over the city departments by computer. So we did look into Ms. Mealy's question from last week, and Chris, do you want to address the allocation?
Yeah, based on the allocation of the systems, I spent about 35-ish, a little bit more than that % time with the police department. So about a third of my day, every day. And they have 40% of the machines.
Okay, got it. All
Are
right.
we going to,
And it had also been mentioned about the body cameras. I spent maybe 15 minutes on those to get them set up, and that was it.
Got it.
On
So,
the whole kit and caboodle.
got it. I guess what I was trying to figure out was some of that data usage or data collection within the police department generating your time there, but it's not. It's mostly PC based.
I'm having difficulty hearing you. I'm sorry.
I don't know
I'm
what-
half deaf.
Bonnie's mic must be totally different from mine. I said, I guess mostly what I was asking is or what we were talking about last week was the police are collecting a bunch more data than most other departments in the city. Is that what's driving how much time you're spending there, or is it specifically like
Is that
PC
plus
issues?
the tougher on the vehicles?
Mhm.
I mean, you have computers bouncing around in cars,
Got it.
you know, and it's just a multitude. of
So you're
things.
mainly
They
just
do
fixing-
use a lot of technology.
Right.
And they use it. It's
Yeah.
just not sitting there.
Yeah. Okay.
Um,
But so, yeah, so it is, even though you're not necessarily spending time on the body cameras, you're spending time integrating all the various components of the
Yes.
technology they have. So,
Yes.
yes, okay, right. Thanks.
Sure.
Were any adjustments considered, given the fact that he's allocating about a third of his time to the police department?
It's already at 41% of his department is going to the police department. And based on conversations, we felt like the PCs were the best. It's not
Okay.
only the PCs, it's the cars and the
PCs,
computers
the in-car
too.
cameras or
Right.
in-car
Right.
systems, I should say.
So it's
You know,
not
so
just like a computer sitting on a desk. He's using all the computers that are being used by every department. And Chris felt like that was a fair representation of how his time is allocated.
Okay.
without doing a time study, you know, punching in and out every time I go someplace, which, sorry, that
Take
ain't
a lot of
happening.
Any other comments or questions related to the IT budget before we go to capital projects? Okay. Chris, we'll go to your capital projects.
Okay,
You have a couple.
yep, just a few. Support equipment, which is consists of basically the network switches from the core all the way down. I'd like to get that replaced as soon as possible. They're currently at about 6 years old or 7 years old. And roughly right now, it's going to be about $45,000 to replace what I want to do. And that's adding some cameras to the system as well for the exterior of the buildings or interior of the buildings where we want to fill the need.
What buildings specifically were we going to be adding cameras to?
See, that's it. I mean, I'd like to add cameras to the exterior of this building for us. So we don't have to go through RBT to get footage if we need it. We can look it right up. Currently, for example, over at the patrol, Officer Bolt, or I'm sorry, dude. Chief Bolt or I can bring up footage on our phones. They can view it inside there instantaneously. I want to integrate that with the brush pile. I want to integrate it with, you know, the exterior of whatever buildings, the impound lot. Whichever buildings we're occupying at the time. It's just a matter of drilling a hole through the wall and putting a wire through it. And that way we're not waiting on the time to get a hold of someone at RBT to get us footage that we can get a hold of.
So here's a question that might go down a little bit of a rabbit hole. I mean, so I guess where are we at with, I guess, taking over any of the network stuff with RVT that really should be us? I mean, I think, so like, I
This
think of the
will-
brush pile, for example, right?
Mhm.
They manage that. It's on their server, et cetera, that really shouldn't be, for example. That there were conversations earlier in the year about
Correct.
that.
The
I never saw
equipment,
anything. Not from
the
you.
networking
from
equipment that's
their
up
end.
there is ours. The cameras kind of are, maybe, but some aren't. This would get it all over to the same system. We are currently using their feed back to RBT and then down to us. Oh, trust me, it's bounces all over the place.
So in essence, this,
Is a good step towards getting it separated out completely.
what would it take to get it separated out completely?
I'm gonna say put a 1 in front of that.
All right.
But there are some other things in the works that will help knock that down a little, the Safe Cities initiative for one thing. Because that'll give us the overlay that we can tie into. Any other questions on the networking equipment?
Okay.
Okay. The servers for the city and police departments need upgraded drastically. They are out of warranty. They've been in place since 2016. And I'm afraid to turn them off because they might not come back on. Estimated cost right now is about $125,000. I've gotten quotes that are slightly less than that. So I pad a little bit on it just because of inflation, supply chain, so forth to get stuff in.
Are those physical servers? Are they virtual?
They are physical hosts that will have virtual machines on them.
Okay. Any comments or questions?
Next is the phone system. In a few years, it'll be 10 years old. So it's time to, we can't upgrade it any further than it already is. So we either go with the same manufacturer for an updated version of it, or go with a whole new system altogether. But at $65,000, we can pretty much get anything that we're going to want that's going to work well, given the size and numbers of phones that we have. Other than that, the last thing is the council packet digitization, which we won't have to do for a few years yet.
Any comments or questions related to the IT capital projects proposed? Ms. Mealy?
Well, only, why won't we have to digitize council packets for a few years yet?
Because the new ones are about ready to roll out.
Oh, okay, we are actually, sorry, not having seen it. I
So
wasn't
this
sure if
is
it was
new
in the works.
computers is what you're saying.
After the ones that you're currently
Correct.
going to be getting.
So this isn't digitizing a process. This is replacing the computers that we just bought.
Okay.
Correct?
Sorry, so the process is a whole other element that we still need to take care of.
I'm sorry.
I said, so the process of digitizing, of digitizing the council packet flow is a whole other thing we need to take care of. That shouldn't cost that much money.
Well,
but,
the digitizing the council packets is literally just an email.
Yeah,
Yeah, and so what Ms. Mealy's talking about, your predecessor was kind of helping us make that, the process of generating everything, the approval process be digital rather than.
Oh,
Yeah,
a
so-
workflow, setting up a workflow. Okay, that's,
yeah,
Exactly.
that's a different
yeah,
thing altogether.
okay. That shouldn't really cost any money, right?
Not much. I
Okay.
mean, Spike Crabtree was helping out with that. So, I mean, there might be a little bit there, but aside from that, I think the bigger thing you'd be looking at is if there's any kind of like software infrastructure,
Right.
whether it's like some kind of like advanced Adobe subscription or something like that.
Got it. Mhm. Okay. Something we'll talk about later, Chris.
Any other comments or questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Black. All right, we will move on to the finance department.
Good evening, President Yoder, members of council administration. Tracy and I are going to tag team this one, starting on page 13, I believe. It's numbered. So salaries, FICA, life insurance, workers' comp, pensions, health insurance, contracted services, subscriptions and dues, training, planning, office rentals, city hall operating allocation for a total 2023 proposed of $529,930, which includes in the salaries a half year for finance director at $95,000, 3/4 of a year for an acting manager. And I'll pause there.
Now, go ahead, Mr. Slaughter. You were going through the Excuse me for a second. Were you going through the salary detail?
Yeah, I was just going through the salaries there for a minute for what we budgeted at half year of finance director.
Okay.
And a 3/4 of a year, be a full-time, is the way we budgeted it, with the understanding that, if possible, we could get a person in for a half of the year, as a finance director, if we're able to get to a place where we feel like bringing someone in makes sense, and we find someone that's qualified for that role, and 3/4 of a year working with Tracy in the finance department as an acting finance manager in there as well. Again, it would be full-time, but if we post it and get a qualified person to work alongside Tracy to get them up to speed.
All right, so between page 13 and the salary detail, any questions or comments from members? Ms. Mealy?
Well, several, but have we gotten to the contracted
Yeah.
services line item?
You
Yep,
covered that
yep.
whole, that entire page.
I'm so sorry. I was busy actually searching for the page. So.
Sorry about that. Yeah,
maybe
I'm
Can
sorry.
you go back
Yeah.
over that?
Sure. So contract services, that line item there, 156,000, that's Tracy for 30 hours per week for a half of a year, because obviously we still have a lot of work to do, clearly to get out of the situation that we're in, get caught up with our audits and all of that. And then what we looked at was 10 hours per week for the second half of the year. Again, estimating, hopefully, we're obviously Tracy's doing a tremendous job. We get back on sound financial footing, and then she's able to transition in a finance director into that mix, along with the financial software and the HR software that we're working with DCD right now. So as we transition all that in, that was sort of how we envisioned it at this point. Again, obviously, there's a lot of variables there as far as getting up to speed and back on sound financial footing, and then getting our audits completed and getting a person in here to take over from where Tracy leaves us.
Agreed. And the finance software we're anticipating to be paid in full?
So DCD, as part of the stamp program, will pay for 70% of it, possibly a little bit more, but with that program, it's definitely 70%. And Tracy, myself, and Molly are working on that right now. We're hopeful, I think, to have it by December 8th, council meeting in front of you all for that, for the financial software.
And the remaining 30% then?
Our 30%, that will come out of the IT department, that's right.
Okay, so it's budgeted in IT currently.
So we asked DCD for upfront costs and first year
Okay.
of maintenance. So we're waiting to hear if they're going to do that for us.
Okay. So, and then we would pay the remaining time on the contract. Is that the idea? Sorry, I'm confused.
Yeah, so
Okay.
DCD will cover 70%.
Right.
So we're trying, there's a lot of upfront costs into
Right.
implementing the software and then ongoing maintenance costs.
Right.
We do not anticipate the accounting software until the end of 2023.
Got it.
So it is not factored into the cost of this budget because we don't, it's
We
payroll.
don't think it'll.
Payroll is this year and maybe some upfront costs of the accounting software, but not all of it.
Okay. Got it. Okay, so it's not in this year's budget, but it will be in the 2024 budget.
That's correct. It'll be ongoing after that point, right?
Okay. Got it.
And we anticipate payroll to start April 1, I believe.
The pensions are going to go live outsourcing January 1st, and then active payroll will go April 1,
Okay.
if approved.
I was going to say pending council approval,
Right.
of course.
And that's
DCD.
coming to us on December 8th.
We're shooting for December 8th, yes.
Okay.
We're working with DCD right now, Molly and Tracy and myself. the way it works, we have to work with them first and then comes to council. So pending, they give us the go-ahead, we'll have it to you all by the 8th.
At the latest, the 15th.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Excellent. Thanks.
Any other comments or questions?
And
There's
the,
Slaughter, remind me of the strategy on the staffing. So there's like half a finance director. You're proposing to hire them July 1, for
right,
example. What's the 0.8 budget to fiscal officer?
so the half a year for the finance director, 3/4 year for the acting account manager. And then we have the 3% raise for Kristen's in that role, plus a half a person is what was proposed.
Okay. So we're gonna hire somebody in April, we're gonna hire somebody in July, essentially. Okay.
Yeah, if it, yeah,
Why the, so, I mean, why the, more so with the director of finance, why the 6-month lag? I mean, because realistically, that position will have been vacant by the time of hire for roughly a year.
well, mainly because we don't think that we're going to be in position to hire January 1. Obviously, we still have a lot of moving parts. Tracy still has a lot of work to do. And so to bring someone in January 1, we didn't believe made a whole lot of sense given the situation that we're in. So we felt like we'd be in a much better standing and position July 1st to then transition someone in at that point.
Okay. The only other thing I would add to, I mean, regardless of what the makeup of that department looks like, whoever is the head of that department should really be approved by council.
Yeah. They'll have to be, I think, because the director, right?
Director of finance will not have to be legally. I mean,
Okay.
It's all about the naming or what have you. My point, all I'm trying to say is, my point is, regardless of like what the job looks like or the naming, we should update that so that it's properly reflected with what you are.
Right, it was,
It's a stupid technicality.
right, I remember.
We should just make sure that that's cleared up, whatever you decide to call it, name it. More so for whenever we're all, kicked back and not
Right.
here and watching other people try to do
Director of
this
Finance and
job.
Administration. I remember
Correct.
now. That's
Yeah,
right. That's
so-
correct.
I'd say as you get into next year, as you identify what that looks like, you should look to
Yep.
bring that forward. And we
Yep,
can work
for the
through and
ordinance, the
Update that.
update.
Same thing with the public safety department too. We have a director of public safety that
Yep.
has never been filled for a long time. I mean, if we need it, we should keep it and fill it. If we don't need it, we should get rid of it and update that accordingly. So
Yep.
it'd be good to see in the spring. Thank you. Any other comments or questions before we continue through in the finance department?
A comment that I would ask that we don't need the answer for this at the moment, but I know that I should say, I believe that we voted on an expiration date for your contract, whether it be time and or dollar amount. If we could have an update before our next council meeting as to where we are with that. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? All right.
Next page.
Yep.
All right. So finance and purchasing, salaries, FICA, life insurance, workers' comp, pensions, health insurance, insurance, commercial policies, subscription and dues, municipal tax office, general office supplies, printing supplies, office equipment, service contracts and rentals, contract services, and then interest short-term for a total proposed of $696,575. And again, that's the 3% for Kristen and the half person there in the salary on that page.
Okay. Any comments or questions, Ms. Neely?
So we'll kind of have 2 half people then in finance, right? The split position with the treasurer's office and then.
No, the proposed budget
Yeah.
gives a full-time person to the
Right.
treasurer's office and then a half-time person for us. A
Yeah,
part-time
but so the
person.
full-time person with the treasurer's office is supposed to be kind of a shared position with finance? No,
In this budget, it's a
Yeah.
full-time
Right.
full-time position for treasurer and just half-time for us.
okay, so we're no longer contemplating.
Right.
sharing.
Right,
It started getting a little, sorry, Tracy, go ahead. started getting a little quirky with the union. Would it be a union spot? Would it not? So then we felt it was cleaner to just do it this way, to give Kevin that spot and then give the halftime here to
Okay.
finance.
Got it. And then, when are we looking at RFP insurance? I know we'd initially said we were going to do it after 3 years, which would be this year, correct?
Yeah, so I think Molly's been talking, we did what, workers' comp this year? Or life insurance this year. And I know she's met with a number of individuals recently. So we'll be looking to put that out probably first thing in the new year. So I think she still has some more meetings left this year. Insurance people have been calling a lot recently. I guess it's that time of year. But she's been in a number of meetings. So we keep telling you, we're going to look to RFP that as we move forward.
Okay.
So basically early next year, I would imagine we do that.
Got
So,
it.
but she still is having ongoing meetings now. So if we do see anything in the interim that really jumps out, like how we saved a ton of money on that life insurance, then she'll bring that to council.
Got it.
So, yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, I think that's it for finance, correct? Am I missing any pages? I don't think I am, but. Okay, we will move on to the Office of Community and Economic Development. Welcome, Skip. Good evening.
Good evening. Excuse me. Good evening, President Yoder and members of council. The budget information provided is the spreadsheet that outlines the costs that are in excess of the administrative line items in the CDBG and home allocations. We have also provided a narrative that describes the initiatives of the office and all of its activities. That amount is $304,736. These funds will allow the department to retain the services of CEDACOG, which will provide consulting services to the CDBG program. Internally, Community and Economic Development, we will manage the home program, the Redevelopment Land Bank Authority, the HARB, the LERTA, and the FAIR programs. And it'll also allow the department to interact with the community and developers and whatever else is necessary to improve the economic climate for the city of Williamsport. Along with Tyler Dombrowski of CEDACOG, Deputy Director Janae Drummond, and myself are here to try to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Skip.
I can go through the line items if you wish me to, but that's up to you.
Just give us the spark notes.
Okay. If we look at personnel services, we're looking at salaries, FICA, life insurance, workers' comp, pensions, and healthcare. We don't have anything under supplies and materials. We do have purchase of services contracts for office rental, city hall operating allowance, and contracted services, which is CEDACOG. The total of that amount is $304,736.
Thank you, Skip. Are there any questions or comments from members of council related to the community economic development budget? Ms. Mealy.
Well, the primary one that I have is we've had a lot of discussions about work that community development could be doing outside of the scope of the specific community development block grant and home funding requirements. So what I'm most confused about with this budget is why we're choosing to take the money that we're spending with CEDACOG is the most clear expenditure of funding directly related to community development, block grant funding, and home funding in that department. So why are we choosing to take that out of the general fund budget instead of something else within community development? Do you understand what I'm saying? We sort of had this discussion all the time with different pots of funding. What's the most restricted, what's the least restricted? The CEDACOG contract directly applies to our reporting requirements with community development, correct?
Yes.
Right. So wouldn't it make the most sense to utilize community development block grant funding to cover that
Well, up
instead of,
until- That's a potential. I'm sitting here listening to this discussion, and because this is such a new initiative, last year was the first year that the department approached council for any funding out of the general fund.
Mhm.
This is our second year, and it seemed the simplest way to approach it was to do it as the CEDACOG as a contract for services, and that we would still continue to do our work as it pertains to home and other programs and just allocate those funds. At the end of the day, the home program, CDBG program cannot cover the expenses of our office. Even if we took CEDACOG out of it and we did it all and eliminated the other programs that we were doing, there's not enough money in our allocation of CDBG and home to cover the cost of this office.
But I understand that. I think she's asking, I mean, just to put it in maybe a more direct point, the CEDACOG contract is for compliance for CDBG funding.
Correct.
So why are we not using CDBG funding to pay for that contract?
We could do it and then change everything else to a different, to
Is that
line
correct,
item.
Ms.
that's,
Mealy?
well, yeah, I mean, there, there are a number of questions and I think still a lengthy conversation we need to have about the allocation of general fund money to that department and what the department is doing with that general fund money. But I think the most essential point to me within this budget is the only thing that we know beyond a shadow of a doubt we can use community development block grant funding for is the compliance funding
Yeah.
that we're paying to CEDACOG. So that we don't have any doubt
Yeah.
about whether or not we're taking money we have community development money that we can't use for other functions within the planning department. It would seem wisest for us to take, if we take no other money out of, out of community development, we should be taking that CEDACOG funding out of there. And then we can start discussing what does qualify as an expense under the city budget. But sorry.
Certainly. Well, I mean, when you look at this budget, there are some costs related to staffing, which are minimal compared to that. I mean, and they're two separate conversations.
Right. I mean,
So
I would
I'm
actually.
not, I don't think you are, and I don't disagree with having them for compliance. I think it's a good idea.
Right.
I just think we can pay it with CDBG funding rather than general fund funding.
So there's a cap on administrative costs in CDBG, and we can certainly move the 141 into those administrative costs, but then all the salaries that are currently in administrative costs are going to come into the general fund budget. So it's six, one half dozen the other in terms of a total cost, but I understand your
historic architectural review board meetings and other things that people within the community development department are working on that we don't believe qualify as to be spent out of community development block grant funding. So it would seem to me that yes, if regardless of the dollar figure, which to me is another discussion, it should be the salaries of the employees in community development that should be coming out of the general fund, because then we don't need to worry about whether or not they are doing work. I mean, I am still worried about it, Skip. You're not off the hook there. But for compliance purposes, we don't need to worry. Like, we know that money is coming out of the general fund. If you are not working on something community development block grant related, then we don't need to explain it to HUD and we don't need to pay the money back. Where, that just seems to me, the only funding that we know within community development explicitly is only being spent on community development is the CEDACOG funding. So let's just take that out of community development. Then, right, there is the additional conversation of, staff time, what work are we doing? Is there a way to economize on the work that we are doing on community development if that department and those positions are not funded by the money that we're getting for community development, and yet we are charged with expending those funds with a cap on how much of the allocation we can use for that, then how do we better economize within that department in terms of staff time to make the staffing, the funding that we have for staffing and that I think that's a conversation that we need to be having. But my primary point is that I would first off like to see that contract services line come out of there because I think that money should not be coming out of the general fund. And then I would like to see what that looks like in terms of salaries, FICA, or other projects that we put in there. I mean, I know, do we still have any costs related to HARB in terms of software, in terms of paper, in terms of, because that should obviously be in this document, right?
We can adjust it to make that effect.
Okay, well, I mean, that money we know we can't pay out of CDBG.
Line item that we fund.
Right.
So breaking it down to each one of the programs is a little bit different.
I mean, I'm not necessarily saying that that's required. I'm just saying that those things that are potentially dicey expenses to use HUD money for are the things that should be in the general fund, right? And then, and the things that we know without a doubt are CDBG related should be in the CDBG budget. And then, okay, that's my piece on this for now. But I'll welcome other people to, if anybody else has anything else.
Any other comments or questions?
I saw the gentleman in the back there had his hand up.
Yeah, Tyler's here if you would like him to answer any of the
For
questions
CEDACOG.
relevant.
Mhm.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for CEDACOG specifically?
Well, or Tyler, did you want to make any point about what I was saying?
Yes, good evening,
Hi.
Council President, council members. Just to, I guess, conclude on the discussion as far as how best to utilize your CDBG admin funds, as far as what you're paying where. It would be my recommendation to the council, as has been deliberated, to use your CDBG funds to pay us. There are pretty specific ways that CDBG funds for admin purposes can be utilized, and it's pretty straightforward, simple as far as paying for our services.
Mhm.
It's much more tedious and time consuming documenting your time and expenses using admin funds for paying your staff. So just wanted to
Got it.
concur on that.
Okay, thank you. We appreciate that. concurrence.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? I've got one. Skip, in your narrative, you referenced, using, I think, staff time, probably likely out of the general fund to support the redevelopment land bank, for example.
Yes, sir.
I mean, how much of your staff's time is being dedicated to helping that out right now?
At this time, probably 8 to 10 hours on a monthly basis.
Okay.
But as we begin to move forward with the projects that we even talked about tonight, about taking down homes and blight removal and land bank acquiring properties and redeveloping them or those kinds of things, that's going to require increased time and effort from staff. We will be bringing to you a memorandum of understanding in short order, which will outline the issues that we're discussing right now relevant to how the Land Bank Redevelopment Authority will be moving forward with the utilization of the Office of Community and Economic Development to serve as its staff to administer all those programs. That'll be coming to you here in very short order. Solicitor Austin White is reviewing it as we speak. So I would anticipate moving forward, once we get the program up and running, that we could be putting in 30, 40 hours a month, depending on, right now there's, if memory serves me correctly, there's 4 properties that have been transferred from the blighted properties review process to the redevelopment authority. And there's probably 9 or 10 more that are in the works, ready to move forward into that process. And as soon as we have the availability of some funding so that we can start acquiring them and start getting into the demolition and putting the liens on the property so that we recollect the city's investment into the properties. But that's all going to take time and effort as we go forward. At this minute, we're probably putting, like I said, 10 hours a month.
So it'll ramp up as
Yes, sir.
that work begins to ramp
Yes,
up.
sir.
I know we've put a decent amount of money into both of those through rescue plan funding. I'm of the impression we can use that money to hire staff for the redevelopment and land bank authority. If you haven't looked at that, I would encourage you to look at that.
Part of
and-
that agreement is for those authorities in those processes to reimburse the city for our
Okay.
staff time.
Okay.
That's all part of that memorandum that we're going to be presenting to you
Okay.
shortly.
Yeah, we'll take a look at it at that time. I personally had always hoped to see those authorities hire staff on their own. I mean, just rather than having staff that are in a couple of different lanes, so to speak, could have a specific focus on just that, because it's a big problem in the city. But if this is the approach they're looking at, I mean, we'll take a look at it. I'll be interested to see what that looks like. So.
At least to get it up and running, the initial phases of it for the first couple of acquisitions, so that we get a procedure in place and a program established, so that we actually know moving forward what you're going to need if you're looking to hire a director or other staff to go with the program, what is actually necessary. I think it would be in the best interest of the city to let our office handle the initial stages, format it, and then come back to you as we move forward.
All right. Thank you, Skip. Any other, Ms. Mealy?
Just from an ARPA compliance standpoint, Derek and Tracy, perhaps, we're looking at putting funding from ARPA funding into the land bank. What does that look like in terms of, I know we're supposed to have it expended and or allocated by 2020, by the end of 2024. It could be spent then on staff, either there or our staff, one way or the other.
And-
There's no, but there's, yeah.
Right, Tracy and I we're gonna explore that a little bit more. Look at how some other RDAs and land banks, if they have staff, how they fund it, and if they even have staff. So we're gonna explore that question a little more. We'll come back with the answer. But yes, as far as the ARPA funds, that can be.
Just making sure there's not one that's more economically advantageous choice for us than the other.
No.
And Skip, just a quick question for you on the home funding. So CEDACOG is basically fully managing community development block grant funding at this point. Is that
They're going to be managing the community development block grant funding.
all of it?
The
And
home pro-
that allocation is about $1 million a year, right?
The allocation was $1,042,000
Got it.
for the 2022 year. Home was about $250,000. We will still be administering the home program completely.
Got it. And what is it that we do with the home funding? Home funds the Chodo, right?
Chodo, it also does home rehab. It does first-time home buyers, those types of programs, home
Okay.
rehab.
And the first, but only to the tune of about $200,000 a year.
Correct.
And so we're proposing that the 5 people who work in community development will essentially only be administering that
Well, there'll be parts of
$200,000.
the CDBG program that we'll be administering also.
Okay, we are still administering
Yes.
some parts of the community
Yes,
development block grant.
we're going to be dealing with the financial end of it and those kinds of things.
Okay, the financial end of it, meaning what? Sorry, in this case.
Doing the drawdowns, doing the administration of the payment of funds to different contractors, those kinds of things are all still going to be handled through our office.
Got it. So we're handling the money. CEDACOG basically just taking care of all the reporting.
Correct. They're going to
Okay,
handle those issues, yes.
got it. Okay, understood. And then part of the responsibilities of your office, I'm assuming, would be finding a home for those additional home funds, the returned funds that we have, the 1.2 million, right?
That's all
and
going
first-time home buyer.
into hopefully a totally revamped first-time home buyers program.
Right, and your department would be managing that, but there would be no charge back to any sort of, to that fund at all that we could engage in, right? Okay, just kind of wrapping my head around the plan too. Thanks.
Any other comments or questions for the community economic development budget? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Skip. Thank you very much. Okay, we do have a couple of miscellaneous fund budgets on here. I think we've covered these between the past 2 meetings, but we do have an opportunity if there have been other questions, or if there's any other thoughts that we need to discuss related to both city hall operating and capital projects, we can certainly do that. So I guess I'll just open the floor. Are there any comments or questions related to either the city hall operating fund or the capital projects fund that we haven't either hit or that have popped up since we've last hit them? Mr. Mackey.
Yeah, if we could go back, Chris, to the server upgrade. We're proposing to purchase that with ARPA? Did you say? Because you said you're afraid to turn it off. So are we gonna see a server purchase here in the very near future?
Hopefully, yes.
And is there a plan on how we're gonna fund that?
Well,
So-
at this point, I mean, they need replaced.
So
whether we go through-
everything in the capital budget that they're
Is-
proposing to fund for 2023 is funded
Okay, it just
through
wasn't.
either through a combination of general fund, whatever, yes, general fund. Yeah, let's
Okay.
not get technical.
All right.
If this budget passes as it's set out, that will be fully funded for a purchase in 2023.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so John, just the mayor and the finance department have chosen to put about $4 million worth of American Rescue Plan Act funds into this year's budget as part of the lost revenue. And what that allows is for freeing up of some funds in the budget that otherwise might have been spent on police salaries or something like that. And those monies are going to fund a lot of continuing items that we need to replace on a regular basis that then.
Yeah, no,
are in the
I'm
capital
aware of
projects
that.
budget.
Yeah.
Right, so that $100,000 is coming out of the general. fund
Okay,
budget.
I just wanted to make sure I didn't hear anything specifically about we're coming to you with a server that we want to purchase. So I just want to make sure that that was happening. Yeah.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions related to either city hall operating or the capital projects funds? Okay. Somehow we did that in 2 hours and 15 minutes. All right.
It just means December 8th is going to be ugly.
Yeah, pretty much. All right. We'll move to item 2, announcements. Our next regularly scheduled city council meeting is on Thursday, December 8th, 2022 at 7 p.m. here in Trade and Transit 2, 3rd floor. There will be a special council meeting on Monday, November 28th, a week from today, 7 p.m. Trade and Transit 2. Upcoming meetings, again, Monday, November 28th, 7 p.m. is a special city council meeting. Monday, December 5th, 12 p.m. Planning Commission. Tuesday, December 6th, 1 p.m. Finance Committee and 2:30 p.m. Public Works. Wednesday, December 7th at 9 a.m. is our ERC, Economic Revitalization. 11:30 Public Safety. Thursday, December 8th, 7 p.m. is our next regularly scheduled city council meeting. We're adjourned. This isn't a voting meeting, so we don't need to do a motion second, all that. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody, and we will see you in a week.